to the Be the Ultimate Assistant podcast with Bonnie and Vickie. Hello, everyone. I'm Vickie Sokol-Evans.
And I'm Bonnie-Low-Kramen.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hey, Vic.
I'm sitting right next to you this time.
Yes. The last time we were together in a room doing this, we were in Austin at your house. And today we're in Edison, New Jersey at mine.
Edison, New Jersey. The home of Thomas Edison? What's the tie-in, the connection with Edison?
Right. Edison. It is about Thomas Edison. He had one of his labs here. And it's so cool. There's a memorial tower, and it's in the shape of a light bulb. It's so cool. You can't go up in it, but it looks like a giant light bulb. And they have the original phonograph in there. Like talk about
tech savvy.
This is a guy very tech savvy.
Tech savvy. He was definitely like one of the first tech savvy people. Now that's tech savvy for sure.
Absolutely. I have to take you there one of these days.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
It's so cool.
Speaking of tech savvy, we just ended our last two episodes was all about the tech savvy assistant, and a lot of buzz around that term, and we've got some additional content we want to add, but we will definitely include some follow-up in a follow-up episode to address a lot of your questions and comments that we've been receiving.
Right. And any of you who have ideas about that, about either being tech savvy or other topics for these podcasts, we welcome your feedback. We've heard from so many of you, and it's really cool that you're really loving what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So yay.
Yeah, yay. I mean, there's even we found an actual another core skill. So instead of there being 7, I think there's actually 8. So I'll reveal in one of our next tech savvy episode what the 8th core skill is.
How did that happen? How did you find that?
Well, one of our listeners emailed me.
Okay,
yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yay! Thank you.
Exactly. So today though we're going to kind of switch the tables, turn the tables, and we're going to talk, really focus on you and your experience working with executives and assistants and creating that healthy partnership, successful partnership between the executive and the assistant. And if you don't mind, I'd like to start with your relationship with Olympia Dukakis. So I've seen you both interact. I've had dinner with you. She's attended she visited a couple of our workshops in New York, and she has a great deal of respect for you, and she obviously wrote the foreword in your book. Is that right?
Yes, she did.
And the same thing. You have a great deal of respect for her. There's like this mutual respect between the two of you, and having worked for her for 25 years, that's obviously a very successful partnership. And what a great mentor you had in her.
I was so fortunate. You bet.
And so I think that you're the perfect person to explain what it is to have a great partnership. And so tell us about your role with Olympia, your partnership with her, and then I'd like us to kind of go to what's the landscape look like as far as the executive and assistant role today? Right.
Well, certainly in year 1, it was very different a relationship than it was in year 25. It's a living, breathing thing. And I learned so much from Olympia, who is really one of the most powerful influences in my career and in my life. But what I understand about the workplace, I learned so much from her about that. And that is that a job description is not in stone, that it's a living, breathing entity, that it has to move and shape and evolve, and you have to talk about it. Olympia, I used to say, if I didn't hear from her, no news was good news. And so it needs to be a customized, personalized relationship between an assistant and an executive. You're two distinct people, and I understood I brought skills and talents to the table, and so did she. And what was great about the relationship is that I was a theater major in college, and for 3 months I tried being an actress. So what I had with Olympia was empathy. I understood what it was to audition, and I understood what it was to memorize lines. And so, but once I became her assistant, I did not want to do what she did. And she would look at what I did for her, being on the computer and scheduling and doing correspondence.
And travel.
And all of that. She so didn't want to do what I did. So we had this great mutual respect for one another. Neither one of us wanted to really tread on the other, but we truly understood what that was. She wanted to understand how I did my work. And so by year 25, I think my job description had to have expanded by 4 or 5 pages. And in the land of high-profile people, it is a serious combination of personal tasks and executive assistant tasks. But what I realized, and my book came out in 2004, 80% of what I did for Olympia Dukakis was what every assistant on the planet does. And now that we've been traveling all over the United States and around the world, and I think we've had students we've been counting, over 40 countries, right, Vic?
Yeah, amazing.
It's amazing. What I feel is so valuable now is that I've spoken with executives all over the world, and I can tell you, Vickie, and I can tell our listeners what I've learned from those people.
I definitely want to kind of branch off into that, and I also want to at some point address that evolved job description, because I think some people might be cringing at the thought that, wait, my job description is this today, and you're saying it's going to grow into something else tomorrow. So I want to talk about that.
Yep.
Before I do, did you have an objective going in? Like, did you have a purpose or a mission? Like, what was the understanding that two of you had?
Yeah.
Of that partnership.
Right. And I write about this in my book, Be the Ultimate Assistant, that I understood that I needed to treat Olympia in a very customized, personalized way, and that the way I saw my job is that I would do whatever it took to get the job done. That my job was to give Olympia Dukakis peace of mind about her life, which is not an easy thing to do. But I knew in her, no news was good news, that she would be on the phone telling me if there was an issue with something. And the activity was so constant and so intense and so dense that there was a lot of room, a lot of possibility for mistakes and errors and things. My job was to be extremely detail-oriented and to handle the minutia of life, to enable her. In her case, she was an actress, but, of course, it could be for anyone that you work for. But in her case, I did everything I could to support her to do the things that only she could do. She's the only one who could memorize her lines. She was the only one who could go for the doctor's appointment. She was the only one who could go for the costume fitting, and on and on. I was the one doing the travel arrangements, booking the car, booking the makeup artist, booking the costume folks. In the end, our goal was to make us both super efficient so that she was maximizing her 24 hours in a day, as was I. And that meant using technology smart. But when we began, we didn't have a computer or a cell phone or I remember the first fax machine. I mean, I know it sounds like the dark ages, but when we teach our Be the Ultimate Assistant classes, we have assistants in the room who have survived this massive learning curve in the workplace. And we cannot ignore that. That's a huge achievement to having done that. We went through the Oscar race. In 1988, Olympia was nominated for and won the Oscar for Moonstruck. She helped her cousin, Michael Dukakis, run for president of the United States. And I was coordinating all the travel for that, all the activity around that. And on top of that, I was pregnant with my son Adam that year. So I look back and we did that, true story, did that without a computer or a cell phone. I came home and it got done, folks. It got done. I know there are a lot of people listening who remember the world without these devices.
So if you think, actually, I think that you had a really big role in her winning the Oscar, right? Because you said you took away the minutia of her life.
Yeah.
You gave her more time in her day and gave her peace of mind so she could only focus on what only she could do.
That's right.
Which was give an Oscar award-winning performance. And so I think that's critical for any executive, and for those of you, the assistants that are listening, is rather than focus on, well, am I supposed to do this task or not, does this free up time for my business partner for my executive so they can do what makes them successful, what makes the company successful.
Right. And that's precisely right. Very tricky. The managers and executives are not made alike. That's why this job will never be outsourced. The high-level executive assistant will never be outsourced to another country because it needs to be handled in a customized, personalized way. That Olympia's preferences are different than any other managers. So that's why when we train assistants who are now supporting 2, 3, 5 executives, that's a particular challenge because each one of those executives has different preferences, and they have to bounce back and forth between the personality types and those details. The minutia, this is not an easy job. So that's why anybody who says just an assistant, they so don't know.
So, okay, so that brings me to the point, because you said that this job can't be outsourced. Yet there's this whole new, I don't know how new it is, but the idea of this VA, virtual assistant.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the different types of executive assistant roles?
Right. What's happened, there's been a big evolution in the role since 2008 when we had the economic meltdown in our country. What happened then is I have this image in my head that the workplace got thrown up in the air like a deck of cards. And when the cards came down, there had been a lot of downsizing and layoffs. And in the assistant world, what it meant was that those who still had jobs were now all of a sudden project managers and picking up the slack from the people who were let go. And those who used to support 1 or 2 people were now supporting 3, 4, and 5 people. So we still have the EA, the executive assistant, in the corporate world who's doing only business tasks for their executives. It's very often, unless they're at the CEO level, that they're handling more than one. And then there's the hybrid role, which is called the EAPA, which is referred to as hybrid. It's a hybrid role, executive assistant, personal assistant. And we are seeing that in the corporate world as well as personal world. So unless protocol is explicit, there are a number of corporate assistants now who are involved in personal tasks for their executives. And then we've had the advent of the virtual assistant, the VA, and those professionals are gaining steam every single day because we live in such a virtual world. So we have VAs all over the United States and in other countries doing work for solopreneurs, small business owners, celebrities.
And also they're supporting assistants as well. So if you're an assistant who needs an assistant,
yes,
a VA would be a great solution.
Because I think it makes sense that a VA cannot get into the kind of minutia and the tasking that you can do with a person who's physically there with you and reacting, being able to react in real time. But a VA, there are very real tasks that they're able to do, given the world that we're living in with the internet. They can do research, they can do database management, they can do phone calling. Of course, they need to be trained and vetted. I'm a big fan these days because of the depth and breadth of the responsibilities that assistants need to do. It's really important to check them out. And you say it's database work, to give them actually a task to do as a way to see if the assistant can deliver the results that you're looking for.
Yeah, I did that actually for a webinar transcription. So we tried 2 different VAs, and that way we could pick the one that actually worked well for us.
Right.
Yeah.
There's just someone in our last workshop said this is a profession of skills. And indeed it is.
Absolutely.
I say all the time that it's never been a better time to be an assistant than right now, but it's never been a more complicated time. And assistants across the board in every place I've been agree with that in a big way.
Yeah, and I repeat that quote from you. The last one I just added to the list was the PA, which is what you were. You were a personal assistant.
Right.
And that's for someone high net worth or anyone that wants any help on the personal side only.
Yes. The personal assistant often works out of a person's home. and or their own home.
Yeah.
And it can really be very custom fit. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a set. It's usually not a set 40 hours a week. I think the perception used to be that it was only for celebrities, but now many people have
working
personal
moms.
assistants.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
like a concierge service, or a professional single guy, or a single dad.
Yeah.
It just needs extra help to handle the personal tasks.
We've heard many times of executives in companies. Sometimes it's a man or a woman, and the spouse has a personal assistant to handle the party planning and errand running, that kind of thing. So the message here is that in 2015, you can have what you want, but it's about setting expectations properly. Vickie, you said something interesting about how you developed the job description for your assistant. How did you do that?
Yeah, so I kept analyzing my task list. So I use OneNote, and every time I do what we call a brain dump, and I just dump my brain onto OneNote, and all my to-do items. And then I started highlighting all the things, the minutia, the things that I could give to an assistant and take off my plate, so then I could focus on just what I could do. Like, obviously only I can teach a training session, but as far as monitoring our support email and doing research, that I could pass on to my awesome assistant Michelle. So I think that's the best way to get started.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, I've got a question, some more questions for you, if you don't mind.
Shoot.
Okay. So when we're traveling, and you also, when you talk with executives, so what's the question that executives ask you most often?
Yeah, it really doesn't matter where I am. And when I speak to an executive and I tell them what I do, they say to me, so what can I actually ask my assistant to do? Can I, for example, ask her to do errands for me? There's a lot of confusion among executives, and I realize it's because no one's ever told them what's okay to ask and what's not okay to ask. And I really have two rules about this. Number one is, as long as it's not illegal. And number two, or against protocol at a corporation.
Or company policy, yes.
Company policy. And B, this is the most important thing, that you ask first. Don't just assume that the assistant will be fine buying a last minute gift for your son or daughter without asking first, are you okay with doing this? That is respectful to do. And I'm telling you that as we travel the world, respect and appreciation are the top two things that assistants really want. And assistants love the variety. The thing that assistants in every single country have in common is that they love that no 2 days are ever the same. They love the variety. I have not met an assistant yet for whom that isn't true. So to the executives listening, everything pretty much is fair game.
It's negotiable.
It's negotiable as long as you ask first and to have a conversation about it.
So on the flip side, if for those assistants who are being asked to run an errand or to do something on the personal side versus just of a business nature, what is your advice if they do feel uncomfortable, that they kind of check in with themselves, or obviously speak up and say, I'm not comfortable doing this, or I know someone that's a personal assistant that could kind of fill in? I mean, what would you recommend?
I believe that speaking up is the number one challenge in our workplace. And for these relationships, in order for the relationship between an executive and assistant to be strong and healthy and open and really highly productive, it requires that from the beginning, from day one, that they both set an expectation that if I'm not comfortable with something, you need to please tell me. Because it's not if, it's when conflicts are going to arise. It's too complicated a relationship for there not to be issues. I mean, we find that with one another. I mean, you and I have that deal, right, Vickie?
Absolutely.
If we've got a lot going on, a lot of details, and it's really helpful to make that deal, isn't it? That if there's anything bugging you, we have to say it, because small problems escalate into bigger ones, and it's going to happen. So it's really just a matter of having that conversation and saying, I need 5 minutes. I'm not really comfortable with this.
But you haven't always been this way, right? When you started out, you probably weren't so such an advocate about speaking up. I mean, you and Olympia evolved over the years.
Completely.
Was there any instance where, there was like, oh, I don't know if I should do that or not?
I remember one time early on being really genuinely nervous about asking for vacation time because we were so busy. I was a one-person office, and it just didn't seem to me that there was any, quote unquote good time to take a vacation. I was genuinely nervous. And I remember fretting about it and then thinking, I had to pull the trigger and say it. And I remember saying the sentence, and her reaction was instant. She said, of course. Of course. It was so easy. And so my worry was for nothing. When we hear assistants over and over and over again say how they worry about asking for training, asking for time off, asking, just to bring up an issue, to even pitch an idea, they are so fearful. And over again, Olympia, just showed me through firsthand experience that I needed to just be honest. She was that way with me. She was a role model for that. She was certainly that way with me. Well,
what I just realized, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the successful partnerships that we've seen during our travels. Every single one of them had one thing in common, which was they had each other's back. So Olympia had your back. She wants you to take a vacation.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to be a better employee if
Indeed.
you take a vacation. If you're burned out, you're not going to be good at your job.
And so for the executives listening, I think it's a great strategy to be proactive about it and say to your assistant, so let's talk about the vacations for this year.
When are you taking it?
And when are you taking it? Not if you're taking it, but when are you taking it? Also, what would be great, what I'm seeing as a problem all over the world is that assistants don't have backup, that there's no backup plan for when they go on vacation. Who's going to answer the phone and deal with the day-to-day? And as executives, I think it's a responsibility on everyone's part to address that issue.
That sounds like a great episode, honestly. The whole redundancy. Redundancy overseas means being let go. But the redundancy plan means that there's backup. So how do you have backup? And we know some successful EAs who do have that backup plan that maybe we can have an episode.
Right. Well, I'm a strong believer in cross-training, where you have EAs sitting in at other people's desks just to see and to make sure that it goes smoothly, because every responsible assistant wants things to go flawlessly for their executive while they're away.
Yeah, exactly. God, we could talk about that forever. Okay, let me go back to my list of awesome questions. And so I know I have some executives thinking right now, okay, what are the specific tasks right now that I'm handling myself, that I should immediately turn over to my assistant, like ASAP, so that I can have more time in my day, so I can get rid of the minutia that's in my life, and then I can have peace of mind. What would you recommend?
Here's what I say to that.
Because these are words from executive assistants about my manager will not give up this thing.
Yes. The given is we all have 24 hours in a day. I haven't figured out any person who can manage to make that bigger. So that's the given for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're the president of the United States. Still that 24/7, the 24 hours in a day. So that means, what are we doing with that time? Assistants all over the world complain about the fact that their executives are doing their own correspondence, that they're doing their own scheduling. And my question back to them is, so okay, great, they can do it, but does that mean it's the best use of their time? I'm a big fan of the idea that people need to do the things that they're really good at. And assistants are great schedulers and great, managers of correspondence.
Yeah, but what if the executive is better, Bonnie? That's the issue, right? So, like, if I'm the executive and I do a better job than my assistant, do I continue doing it?
I don't think so.
No.
I think you have to. It is about delegation. I used to call Olympia the queen of the delegators. On the spectrum of 1 to 10, she was at the extreme. Like, she wanted to delegate absolutely everything that I was capable of doing. That meant buying and selling 4 houses, 2 in foreign countries, and, reviewing contracts, anything that I was even remotely capable of doing, she stretched my skill set. And I think executives should do that. What that means, it's a bit of a risk. When you start delegating, you take the risk that your assistant may not do it 100% the way you would do it yourself. But according to Olympia, that was a risk she was willing to take. Were there mistakes along the way? Absolutely. Absolutely. But that speaks to the idea that training is absolutely necessary. In this workplace of 2015, executives do themselves a huge favor if they invest in training for their administrative staff. And it also benefits executives to also have leadership training as well. Because what we have found is that, unfortunately, a lot of executives and leaders, they're so busy doing their job as leaders, which is a very tough job also. We need empathy, that being an assistant is a tough job and being an executive is a tough job. But who teaches executives how to manage people? I don't see a lot of training in that area, and I think it would really help and support this workplace if there was more of it. And that, of course, is what we're involved in, Vickie, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
As we go around.
Yeah, so I think, just to sum that up, is anything that's the minutia in your life, that's obviously that you can hand over. And if you're not satisfied with how it's being done, just seek out additional training for that specific skill. And what are some other ones besides scheduling? Travel, obviously, is one. Travel.
Organizing. Yeah, travel's a huge one. There are assistants who all they do is organize travel because they're supporting multiple executives who are traveling all over the world. So that's huge. Organizing bills and expenses, we hear a lot about.
T&A reports.
Yes, that takes a lot of time. A lot of assistants are involved with board papers, managing documents, getting ready for board meetings, coordinating those events in corporations. They have morphed into something of event planners. Mm-hmm. A lot of tasks that are being shared with assistants, which are completely appropriate, which is also causing the role to have increases in salary because it's completely justified as they manage these projects.
What about some of the higher level tasks like the eyes and ears? So an assistant, we've had lots of assistants say that I'm the eyes and ears for my executive. So I may go in to greet a guest and visit with them for a little bit and just get some intelligence that I can report back to my executive. So the true business partner relationship.
Indeed, a strategic business partner. Mm-hmm. Those are the best relationships. Those are the most long-lasting relationships. I was with Olympia 25 years. There are many, many assistants out there who've been with their employers 15, 20 plus years. Executives do themselves a favor when they bring their assistant into the inner circle and have them literally at the table at board meetings. Because here's the thing, to all the executives listening, people will say things to your assistant that they would never say to you. And when I say that to assistants, they all nod their heads.
Can you give us examples? Like what?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is that the producer or the director on a film would reveal to me, a real scheduling problem that they're going to be facing next week. And if only Olympia would do XYZ, then this problem could be solved. And so they
don't feel comfortable going to Olympia.
They do not. Right? And it's really by virtue of the fact that it's the boss. It's the person in charge. They don't want to be the messenger to the boss. So they'll tell me. And they'll tell your assistant. And so therefore that makes the assistant, for me, it made me have more information than even Olympia had. And that made me very valuable. So I would choose, what to share, what not to share, when to share it. That's a critical role of an assistant.
Okay, so that reminds me of your favorite film clip.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell our listeners about that, your favorite clip? Because there's been lots of portrayals.
Like Devil Wears Prada and 9 to 5, which, they're funny and all, but and unfortunately true, especially Devil Wears Prada. But my favorite film clip that shows our profession is from Air Force One, the film with Harrison Ford as the president, where the assistant is the one who saves the day. because she knew better.
Plane.
Yeah, the Russian bad guys hijacked the president's plane, and the president and his advisors are trying to figure out how to get everybody off the plane, and they're, huddling, and through this sea of people comes this small, timid assistant who says, "Mr. President, they've cut the phone lines, but I think they only cut line 1. I think line 2 might still be alive," because they were trying to figure out how to communicate with the White House.
The fax machine.
The fax machine that they have line 2 is probably still alive. And Harrison Ford says to her, "If you're right about this, I'm going to make you Postmaster General." And so they go rushing. And of course she's right. And that, I know that everyday life in the real world is not about life and death usually, but assistants do a version of this every single day, where they're the ones who know who to call. They know where the folder is. They know where the key is. They hold a lot of information. And the smartest executives I have met, they never underestimate the value and the power of what this person knows, which is a lot. What they know is a lot.
Yeah. I want to come back to one additional question before we wrap up, and that's the idea of the evolved job description. And sometimes you call it scope creep. And I know a lot of assistants are probably worried about the idea that their job description can evolve from when they first got hired.
Yes.
How do you balance that with the job expanding to more responsibility, then the idea that there might be someone being taken advantage of? Or doing
I'm really glad you thought to ask this question. Here's the thing. That assistants are hired with one job description that comes through the HR department. And then there is that term called scope creep, where when an executive or a group of executives understands what an assistant knows, what she's really great at, then the scope of the job creeps and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So what we're hearing from assistants is that their current job description bears very little relation to what they were hired to do in the first place. And so HR needs to get involved here and keep a handle on what assistants are actually doing. There's a difference between what was expected or what they thought was expected and what's actually happening. And then the real job description, I advise and teach assistants to put that all on paper and to say how much time that's actually taking, and then to understand what that value is. What salary should they be making for the responsibilities that they're actually doing? We can't expect executives to automatically know or be mind readers about what is reality, that they're busy too. So I believe it's the responsibility and the obligation of an assistant to put it all on paper, full disclosure. Let's let HR know what's going on. Let's let our executives know what's going on. And to say, and you know what, this 60-hour-a-week job, maybe somebody is drowning in work and it would be justification for bringing somebody else on part-time. But what it requires is a conversation. It means documenting the reality of it all and then sharing the information. And many assistants just need to be supported to do this, that they cannot any longer assume that HR is aware of how their scope has creeped, nor can we assume executives know it either. We have to take that on ourselves.
I do have an example of that because it happened to me when I was a personal assistant. And so I had a specific roles and responsibilities. And then when they found out that I was a database developer, they then wanted me to, my employer wanted me to create a database for the office. And that's a completely different role.
Yeah.
I'm being paid to be a personal assistant here. Now you're asking me to be your database developer.
Right.
I had to speak up because I knew that they were trying to leverage my technical skills, and that's not the role that because I wanted to take a break from technology at that point. So I just want to be a personal assistant. That's what I want to do. So I knew to not put my foot down, but just to speak up and say.
Yeah, how will they know if you don't tell them?
Right.
How will they know? And it's very important when I'm training assistants regarding your resume, don't put anything on your resume that you're not really interested in doing, because it's a very good possibility you'll be asked to do that task. So if you really don't want to do personal work, you can highlight all the corporate work that you do.
Yeah.
And there are assistants who love doing the personal tasks and others who really don't want to do it at all. And so it's customized and personalized. Assistants have the total right to say what it is they're really great at and the things that bring value to the table. And executives have their needs as well, which, executives really should say what it is that would really make such a difference in their lives.
Yeah. I mean, because in my situation, it wasn't, that I didn't. I love database stuff. But I knew I would suck at being a personal assistant. If they took me over and had me doing the database stuff, I would fail at the PA role. Yeah. So I knew I couldn't do both.
Yes.
So I needed to pick a lane.
Yeah. Olympia was very fond of saying, do one thing well, not two things badly. Yeah. And we talk about that a lot often. Another thing I used to say a lot is you can't blame them for trying.
Right.
You can't blame them for trying about the database stuff. Mm-hmm. So it became your obligation to say, you know what? No, I really don't want to do that. And then it becomes, everybody's got a choice here.
Yeah, and I told him, I said, I'd be happy to switch roles. Like, if this is where you want me, let me think about whether I want to switch roles to that.
And it has a dollar value as well.
Exactly.
We need to be better because of how the workplace has evolved and grown and morphed. It's caused a lot of confusion. Mm-hmm. My goodness, we heard there are 162 titles for this role around the world. So it's no surprise that there is confusion. So that's what Vickie and I are out to do. We're trying to clarify and kind of cut through the cobwebs to come to see what's really going on in our workplace to make it better.
It comes down to this communication, just like what you and Olympia had is, and I know you're going to share a quote in a second from Olympia, but it came down to this, communication and just talking. So when in doubt, if there's any confusion, just talk to each other, speak up, have a conversation, and negotiate what you want that partnership to look like.
Because here's the thing, as I've spoken to executives all over the world, they want to know.
They do.
They want to know. Assistants.
I want my assistant to tell me, talk to me.
Yeah, but assistants need to actually have those words said to them. Mm-hmm. I really want to know. Olympia would say this to me, Bonnie, even if you think I'm going to be upset at something or that I'm not going to like something, I need you to tell me. That's part of why I'm paying you.
Yeah.
So I think executives do themselves a favor if they are literal about it. And you just can't be mind readers and assume. You want to be, and then the best assistants are, but it takes time. It takes a lot of years.
We're ending.
Yes.
We're done for the day.
Well, we are, and I feel like if there are follow-up questions from listeners, whether you are an executive or an assistant, I invite you to communicate with me. The website will be in the links below this.
Yeah, so we can go ahead and say it. So BeTheUltimateAssistant.com podcast.
BeTheUltimateAssistant.com/podcast. Yeah. And we invite you to subscribe to our podcast series.
So, Bonnie, let's go ahead and give us that quote from Olympia.
Well, because I learned so much from Olympia, I thought I'd end with a quote from her. And she lived this philosophy. And she used to say that if you have mutual respect and empathy, everything is possible. And that's how we lived. We lived like that. I think that that's true. Do you think it's true?
Absolutely. Vickie? And you can tell. Just from your even...
Well, you don't last 25 years if there's not respect and empathy. You have the idea that we put ourselves in each other's shoes and understand there's going to be bad days and people get tired, and we're all moving so fast in this world, right? It's 24/7 access, moving at the speed of light with all the wonderful technology that you help us get through. So we thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks for sharing your story and your insight in the partnership between executives and assistants. And definitely, if you're interested in talking with Bonnie, if you need advice and any type of coaching, help with job descriptions or anything like that, Bonnie could definitely help you. So this concludes today's episode. We'd love to hear your feedback, topic ideas, and questions. Visit the podcast page at BeTheUltimateAssistant.com. Thank you again for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye, Bonnie.
Bye, Vickie.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.